Hi, I'm Chrane. For the past 2 weeks, I've been attempting to put together a basic rule set for a Nuzlocke challenge in Digimon Story Time Stranger. And to make it all make sense, we had to put it into practice. So for the past 2 weeks, I've been streaming my progress throughout this Nuzlocke challenge, and this is how it went. On the first night, we started putting together a comprehensive set of rules to make sense for a Digimon Nuzlocke. Now, if you don't know what a Nuzlocke is, it means permanent death for your party members, and whenever you enter a new area, the first encounter is what is going to be added to your party. Now, this comes from Pokemon, and in Pokemon, you have to actively catch your encounters. And if you would have knocked them out, they would have been dead, and the area would have been a bust, and you could not capture a new party member. However, this does not work in the same way in Digimon because of the scans. In this game, you have to encounter a Digimon a certain amount of times to acquire a required number of scans to be able to summon them. So there were some decisions that had to be made, because fundamentally, this is a very different game to Pokemon. This is more like a Persona game. The first choice we made was to put the game on the difficulty hard. Some people asked, why not use Mega or Mega Plus? Well, those difficulties are only available in New Game Plus, and the encounters you face in New Game Plus have almost maxed out attack stats, which means that if you add new party members, they are effectively useless in every way, shape, or form. So this has to be made on a completely new save file. We had some interesting ideas coming from the chat, where instead of the Digimon dying, it instead was reverted back to its pure basic form of an in Training 1 baby form, and you would have to defeat bosses for it to regain further forms and come back to what it lost. At the end of the day, we kind of came to the conclusion that this works better as its own separate mode, which we ended up calling an adventure lock, and we stuck to the more traditional rules of a Nuzlocke for this experiment. So, only one Digimon per area. The first to 200% is converted into a teammate. The first available Digivolution is the one we choose. This was later retooled into rolling a number in a random number generator for basically the game to pick it for you. There are no repeat Digivolutions. At the start, you were not allowed to load enhance. We did go back on that later on, as you will see. As a crazy person, I also put no XP grinding until you reach the last boss, which I can confirm now is absolutely impossible. So do feel free to laugh at me in the comments about putting that in the rule set to begin with. We did put that the only allowed agent skill would be the AoE burst move for the gun, more as a channel meme because I used that throughout my entire playthrough of the game, but it makes no sense to have that in an official rule set, so that was just more like an inside joke. We decided that the only allowed attachment skills would be the ones your Digimon learn through evolution, be it its current form or its previous forms. That way you have a building leveling skill tree, which makes every Digimon more unique. The only one allowed to pick attachment skills is Agumon, but we only came to that conclusion way later. You are not allowed to use the farm. The only way to change a Digimon's personality is through talking, which can happen after every 4 fights. You are not allowed to use items in combat. You are not allowed to run from combat. And the DLC dungeon is not allowed. If you do outer dungeons, you have to convert the Digimon to data. Now, not all of these rules were set in stone. As you will see, there will be changes to the rules as the playthrough went on because this is all a giant experiment. There is an image of the current rules in the pinned comment, and if there is something that looks off to you, feel free to comment and give me some feedback, and we are open to adjustments in the future. And while you're down there, subscribe and like the video. I dare you. So on the first day, we went straight into it. Started a completely new game with the current bug that exists in the game. You have to basically boot up the game, and the first thing you do is click new game. You do not load another game, go back to the menu and make a new one. That will bug out the stats, so we had to make a completely fresh game the first thing we did when we booted up. I gave chat the option of picking my starter. They were very merciful and let me start with Agumon because Vaccine has a huge advantage in the early parts of this game. There were some questions regarding what to do with the first Kuwagamon that you will always get on every playthrough. And we decided to basically treat that as a mix between your first encounter in the sewers, in the area before you get it, and a gift clause type of thing, where you will always be receiving it as a gift, and therefore you should be allowed to add it to your party. After getting jumped by Metal Greymon, which is one of my all-time favorite Digimon, we got some sudden help from Omnimon, or Amegamon if you're nasty. After that, the game tells us about conversion, and this is going to be a huge part of the Nuzlocke playthrough. Here we have Kuwagamon. Now, we had to figure out how to deal with our first actual encounter in the wild. I tried to go for a Tentomon, because I felt very ambitious. However, what I didn't take into consideration is that hard difficulty is quite hard, and I had to pay the price. Agumon died in his very first battle, to a toy Agumon, which hurts even more. When he eventually died, we decided that instead of making a new save and going back to the beginning, we would just continue from where we were because nothing would be different. So we kept going, but added one to the death counter, since this is all one giant experiment. But that would have been the end of the Nuzlocke right there. What did I actually want to put on the team, though? Like, really, if we're gonna keep going, what's worth putting on the team? Really? Did I want to pick up one of the blue cats? Or something else? Because baby forms will always be the easiest to get, because they only require 2 encounters to get to 200%. We can only add 1 teammate per new area. I went for avoiding the blue cats, and in 2 fights we met Botamon twice, which means it's our first new party member. But there was an interesting issue that arose from this, because Botamon will only evolve into Kuwagamon, and we already had one of those. And because of dupe clause, or duplicate clause, which will prohibit us from having the same Digimon twice, our first area was basically a botched encounter. Now, I didn't really think this through completely, and at a later point we came to the conclusion that duplicate clause will only affect Digimon from rookie and up, meaning that Digimon of in training 1 and 2 generations will be unaffected by dupe clause. Point of order, there is also a huge thing I'm forgetting right here, and that is if you get duplicates, you just don't count that as your first encounter. You go for the next thing that happens. So technically, if Botamon was a dead end, I should have just gone for the next thing I got to 200%, because that one would not be counted. We went up to the 2nd floor, which means new area, which means new encounter. However, I was not paying attention, and I kind of forgot that I was supposed to get a new team member on this floor, so I just moved past it. In the 2nd tower, I actually did remember that we were supposed to have a new encounter. I also, for some reason, completely gloss over the fact that we unlock Digivolution in this tower. I completely just blitz past it. Guess what? Kuwagamon turned into an Agumon. Shocker. In the 2nd tower, I actually did remember that we were supposed to have a new encounter. And we got my boy, Motimon. And then, the worst possible thing happened. We got stuck in a fight against a Raremon. This thing is possibly a very early ender of runs. Be very careful with this thing, because what happened is that he destroyed my boy Agumon. Agumon and Motimon barely lived, but they did. But my boy Agumon was out. Things were looking a bit dire at this point. How am I supposed to get past Kuwagamon with a level 3 Agumon and a level 3 Motimon? And since we haven't made the exclusion of in training forms from the dupe clause, I still had a Botamon just sitting in the box doing nothing. That could have been very helpful. Now for my final encounter on the last floor of the government building, we got a Tentomon. I decided to do some grinding to hopefully get past the boss at the end, which is where we also removed the rule of no grinding allowed, because that's insane. Now at this point, we were only allowing the first evolution to unlock to be the one that you went with, which sadly means that most of the time, specific Digimon are always going to turn into the same things, most of the time, which is why we went back on this later and went with a random number generator instead. But at this point, I was basically waiting for Motimon to evolve into Wormmon, which in hindsight might not have been the best decision. But now we had an Agumon, a Wormmon, and a Tentomon. We did some more grinding to get Wormmon a few levels, and then I decided it was time to fight Kuwagamon on the roof. Remember, this is on hard difficulty, and I quickly realized that Wormmon might not be very helpful at all at this part in the game. Agumon, however, way stronger than almost anything else you can put on your team this early in the game. When we finally reach the sewers, we meet Inori's dad and we're about to go looking for her. And at this point, the chat had some very good feedback for me. They told me that we should only have the dupe clause count for rookie and up, therefore my first Botamon was not, in fact, a bricked encounter and allowing me to evolve him into Koromon. Now, for him in the future, Agumon is not an option, but the other evolutions are. So that's where this starts to branch out. Now, with that adjustment to the dupe clause, our first encounter in the sewers is a Bukamon. However, he cannot go back to being a Gomamon again. We've had that. That is where dupe clause comes in, and Gomamon is locked out. But the 4 other options are in play. By the way, if you have a vaccine-heavy team, avoid Muchomon at any cost. Guy's a demon. Between level 6 and 8 for my entire team, I decided to go up and find Inori, which means I was about to fight Raremon, something I was wholly unprepared for. Wormmon was at half health, way before Raremon was, and honestly, I was totally unprepared for his poison mechanics. And at around half of Raremon's health, Wormmon took a beating by Lunatic Gate 2 and died. Things were not looking good at this point, so after Wormmon died, Tentomon died, and then Agumon died. Now all I had was Bukamon and Koromon. And you can probably guess what happened. Air bubbles are not going to be enough to destroy Raremon. So, at the end, he destroyed my team. The run was over. The team was defeated. So we went back to have a look at the rules. And at this point is where we decided that reducing Digimon to in training 1, if they die, should be kept as a separate rule set, which I named Adventure Lock, because it feels more like the anime than a normal Nuzlocke. So we trimmed the rules a bit, and then I went back to grinding to see if that would help make the fight easier. At this point, we started talking about max levels allowed for certain bosses. However, there's a built-in issue with this for this game. In Pokemon, you could just box them and they would stop getting experience. In this game, everything is earning experience all the time. If it's in your party, in your reserves, in your box, in your farm, everything is gaining experience when you finish a fight. So, realistically, there is no good way to maintain a max allowed level for a boss fight. And considering that levels reset whenever you go up to a new generation, like Champion, Ultimate, there is no real good way to decide what a max level allowed should be. Because of that, we kind of ignored max level as part of the rule set completely. Even though, understandably so, a lot of people seem to want it included somehow. I just don't currently see a feasible way of doing so. Now, during my farming, my Koromon turned into a Betamon. Is this gonna help for the fight? Hard to say. He's a virus type, so is Raremon. That's not necessarily a great sign, but we'll see. And then my Bukamon evolved into Gizamon. Is this gonna help? He's also virus, so hard to tell. I did some more grinding to try and get all my team up to level 10, and hopefully this time the fight would be a lot easier. I did not equip a poison wall, which would have been good, but just going in ready with an X-Arts boost to stats made the fight significantly easier. But I did have to grind for about 40-45 minutes to reach this point, which is not optimal for a fun viewing experience. which meant that in the back of my mind, I was considering ways to make grinding more effective and less time-consuming. Agumon destroyed Raremon, and we moved on. Level 10 seemed to be the key to effectively progress. And at this point, we'd already lost the run. So we only did the fight against Raremon as a way to see how far we needed to push our limits in order to beat the fight. But yeah, the run was over. We had already lost, which means the next day, it was a new adventure again. The team had been wiped out and we had to try again. But at least this time we had the intel of how much we needed to grind before actually doing the fight. But at the end of the day, we still lost. And just between you and me, I have the next run recorded. I have streamed all of it. I thought I was going to put it in this video, but the first attempt turned out to be a 15-minute video. The other one is going to be much longer than that. I can hint that already. So if you want to see that in the future, again, subscribe to the channel, like the video, give me your experience down in the comments. Have you tried a Nuzlocke? How did it go? Who was your best fighter? I need the intel, okay? I need all the information I can get, so please, please! What's the key? Yeah, if you enjoyed this video, thank you so much for watching. I hope this brought you some joy and maybe piqued your interest in some Nuzlocking. I don't have an extensive history of running Nuzlocks. This is actually my first one. I've never even done a Nuzlocke in a Pokemon game. I've only watched like dozens of them on YouTube. So this is kind of a whole new thing for me, which is why there's so many mistakes based on me not paying attention, I think. But it is what it is. So if you want to catch future Nuzlocke runs, we are doing them live here on the channel. Come check it out. So, thanks so much for watching. Take care, everyone, and I will see you in the second attempt of the Nuzlocke run here on the channel in... I'm not going to give you an exact date. I don't know it. See you then. Take care of yourselves. Bye.